Imagine being the biggest band in the world. Not just in country music, in the world. You've sold 30 million albums, you're selling out stadiums, and you are the undisputed queens of the airwaves. Then, you say 12 words. 12 words in a foreign country that didn't just trigger a boycott, it triggered a cultural civil war. For 20 years, the story has been that the Dixie Chicks were destroyed overnight. But that's not the whole truth. The real story is much messier, much louder, and involves a brutal feud with Toby Keith that changed the face of Nashville forever. They didn't disappear, but they did learn exactly how much it costs to speak your mind when the world isn't ready to listen. Before the fall, there was the rain. In the late 90s, the Dixie Chicks weren't just a band, they were a phenomenon. They brought bluegrass instruments to the mainstream and made it cool. Natalie Maines, Marty McGuire, and Emily Strayer had a chemistry that was untouchable. By 2003, they were at the absolute summit. They were on the top of the world tour. Patriotism in America was at an all-time high following 9/11, and country music was the soundtrack of the American heartland. Everything was perfect, until 12 days before the invasion of Iraq. They were on stage at the Shepherd's Bush Empire in London. Natalie Maines, known for being the firebrand of the group, looked out at the crowd and said, "Just so you know, we're on the good side with y'all. We do not want this war, this violence, and we're ashamed that the President of the United States is from Texas." In a pre-Twitter world, news traveled slower, but this hit like a tidal wave. By the time they landed back on U.S. soil, the industry they helped build had declared war on them. This wasn't just fans being upset. It was an organized erasure. Lipton Tea dropped them. Radio conglomerates like Cumulus Media banned their music from hundreds of stations. But the most iconic and arguably the most damaging backlash came from within the house. Enter Toby Keith. He began performing in front of a giant doctored photo of Natalie Maines next to Saddam Hussein. Natalie didn't back down. She famously wore a t-shirt at the ACM Awards with the letters LUTLW. Most people didn't know what it meant until later. Loser Uncut Toby Keith Loser. The feud became the focal point of Nashville. It forced fans to pick a side, the patriot or the traitor. And in 2003, in the heat of a looming war, the traitor label was a commercial death sentence. Here is where the Shorts version of history gets it wrong. The Chicks weren't erased in the sense that they went broke. In 2006, they released Taking the Long Way. It was a defiant middle finger of an album produced by Rick Rubin. The lead single, Not Ready to Make Nice, addressed the death threats and the backlash head-on. The result? It swept the Grammys, winning Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Album of the Year. They proved they still had the talent, but the landscape had shifted. They had effectively been pushed out of country and into the adult contemporary and pop world. They were still successful, but the country door was locked and bolted. They went from being the heartbeat of the genre to being outsiders in their own home. Could they have been even bigger? Absolutely. If they had kept their mouths shut, as many critics say, they likely would have become the highest-selling female group in music history, period. They traded a decade of chart dominance for a moment of honesty. Years later, they dropped Dixie from their name to become the Chicks, a move that, much like their 2003 comments, drew a line in the sand. The story of the Chicks isn't a tragedy about a band that lost everything. It's a cautionary tale about the fragility of stardom. It shows us that you can be the most talented person in the room, but if you step outside the brand your audience has built for you, the floor can vanish in an instant. They weren't destroyed, but they were changed. And country music? It was never quite the same after the night in London when a Texas girl decided she'd had enough of being quiet.